What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the SEC West betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, Colin Wilson, who finally gets to talk some Arkansas football and not out of turn. What's going on, brother?
Hit that line, keep on going. Take the ball right down the field. It is time for Razorback football. I cannot wait. Listen, 3 years, we are a stock on the NASDAQ. The stock is up 3 years straight. When is it going to peak? When is it going to fall? Maybe it keeps going. Who knows? We'll talk about it here on the pod.
Woo, big suey. I can already hear Matt dropping that in. Before we get to Arkansas, I think probably the most intriguing team in the country is down in Baton Rouge and trying to figure out what we're going to get from LSU this year. So who better to bring on? Let's start with our guest today, Brody Miller from The Athletic. All right, now it's time to bring in an old friend of the show from The Athletic, covers all things LSU, Brody Miller. You can find him on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. Each and every year we have them on to talk LSU football. And for the SEC West preview, it's even more important to have him on this year because who can really figure out LSU? If you say you really know for sure, you're lying, but Brody will certainly help provide insight because no one's closer to the team than him. What's going on, Brody? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. My favorite show I do all summer. And yeah, I could not agree more with that sentiment. Anyone who pretends they know what LSU is going to be this year is just talking out of their ass. So yeah, but thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, and it starts look, obviously you have Brian Kelly. He's taken over the job. We'll get to him, and if you think the team is buying in and his impact in year one. But one of the biggest unknowns, and it's really important position to a football team, is the quarterback, right? You have Garrett Nussmeier, you have Brennan, who's kind of waited his turn, dealt with injuries, and then you bring in Daniels from Arizona State, the more mobile guys. So all these guys are in like different spots. They have different like talents. And how's it all going to work? Who's going to win the job? How much do you think it matters? Like if this person wins the job, you're going to be higher on LSU than if this. And so where do we stand with the quarterback competition at LSU?
It's going to be so fascinating because, to your point, everything you keep thinking it's obvious and then things keep changing. But what I mean by that is Miles Brennan comes back for year 6, comes back from the portal. You assume that job is his, right? Nope. Jane Daniels transfers in too. Then you're like, wait, they got this huge name transfer, right? Like, oh, he's going to get it. I don't know. Honestly, I think we're at a point now where if you ask me right now to name a starter, I am probably leaning Garrett Nussmeier, the redshirt freshman, who's a former top 100 recruit who's really raw, was really raw, but has just that it factor, very exciting quarterback, but also kind of turnover prone. So, and again, I'm not fully predicting that yet, but it's going to be fascinating. And I think what it's really going to tell us so much is kind of just where Kelly's values are going to lie, because historically, right? I mean, history tends to say Kelly goes with the more trustworthy guy, the veteran, the guy who's going to manage the offense, right? That's even what offense coordinator Mike Denbrock told us yesterday or 2 days ago. But at the same time, that would be Miles Brennan, right? And again, this could change on me, and I could find out my reporting's wrong, but as of today, I feel like Brennan's probably in third place right now. So I think there's a few ways this could go. And to your question of how much does it matter, right? I think if Daniels wins it, it tells you a few things. One, I think it probably tells you what he thinks of the offensive line to some extent. Yeah, which I know we're going to get to in a second. But hey, man, maybe they just need a guy who can make some plays because they know that our line's going to work. And it also might be telling you, like, they just don't trust Nussmeier yet. But if Nussmeier wins it, I think it means that guy. And again, I'm the same guy who predicted they'd be good on this show each of the last 2 years. So I want to preface everything I say with you guys shouldn't trust me. But if Nussmeier wins it, there's probably cause for excitement, because if he earns Brian Kelly of all people's trust, I kind of think Nussmeier has a chance to be a star. I think he's not dumb, even though he's kind of raw. He's the son of Doug Nussmeier, really sharp kid. I think he was just kind of trying to be Johnny Manziel a lot his freshman year, and I think he's honed that in. He can run, so it's not like he's flat-footed. So I think Nussmeier is a really exciting option if he does win it, but he comes with a little more variance, I'm sure. But yeah,
he probably gives you the biggest ceiling, right? The highest ceiling for this year.
I think that's the best way to put it. And I think if it's Daniels, you start viewing it as, okay, this team might just kind of be what it is to some extent.
Nussmeier was the kid that we wanted to come in last year, but there was all the drama about burning the red shirt. Is he going to play in the bowl game?
And Ed Ogeron handled that disastrously.
Yeah, disastrously, of course. And so, Nussmeier is still, I'm actually shocked that he's still there. I'm even more shocked that Miles Brennan goes in the portal, comes out, and then they get another quarterback. And I go back to, I think the whole angle of Brian Kelly wants the most trustworthy quarterback. That goes back to how him and Chip Long, they had worked together forever. And then, there was this kind of argument behind when is Phil Dracovic going to come in and start playing quarterback for Notre Dame? And that's really what Splitsville was up there. So, and then my thinking is when you start off with a Florida State front seven, maybe you're going to throw a quarterback to the Wolves and save save the guy you really trust for SEC play. But I think that kind of leads into the offensive line, which we have to get into. The one stat that I'll throw out there, LSU, number one in the transfer portal in snaps gained, over 15,000. This is like a Hamilton performance. There's like 800 people on stage. I can't tell one from the other. Yeah. Brody, is there someone on the offensive line that you think is bankable that's going to make this better? Is there a transfer that's sticking out? Anything like that?
Yeah, and just to jump in, I think to your point also about the way Kelly tends to handle things, and I like your comment about Florida State kind of throwing the Wolves. He also has a big history of kind of starting a guy, but that's not really the starter. Maybe they split a half, or maybe gives him one game and pulls him. So I think there's something there. To the offensive line, this might be the red flag of the line, but it also might be the exciting part. You could take this how you want. The guy I think who's wowed people the most is 5-star true freshman early enrollee Will Campbell. I think he is pretty much locked down the left tackle job. And obviously you're never going to be too happy when you're true freshmen, you're starting left tackle, but he's a dude. I mean, he's just one of those guys. And I think they really do trust him. The fascinating thing with this O-line is, the way I keep putting it is, I think the floor is a little higher than it's been the last 2 years. I just have no confidence on where that ceiling is, where I think they're doing a really interesting thing right now, just kind of cross-training every position, the cliche of get the 5 best guys on the field. But there's scenarios where that works. Garrett Dellinger is a former top 100 recruit who showed some really nice stuff in moments last year as a true freshman tackle, guard, even played some tight end. Right now, he's the first team center. And if that hypothetically, if that works out, if he really can play center, that's a huge win. That's a really good player filling a massive hole. And then you can kind of get creative with the rest of your guys. I like the depth, like in a weird way. I kind of think they have 8, 9, maybe 10 guys who you could play. But if you ask me if there's one guy I would be confident rating, I don't know, an 87 overall in a video game, I wouldn't be. It's just really weird. So I think, it depends on your trust of Kelly, depends on your trust of O-line coach Brad Davis, who it was a very mediocre to bad offensive line last year, but you also weirdly saw it get better as they spent more time. Because remember, Brad Davis didn't join the staff till July because of that bizarre firing James Craig situation. And they kind of got better as he was there. And again, I'm not saying I think this O-line is going to be a strength. I kind of just feel like they can hang in that C- zone. But again, I'm not confident of that because it's August 10th right now. And there's only one starter, who it is. And that's never probably a good thing.
And I think you're the one that had that stat last year, the number of permutations of offensive linemen playing together. I think it maybe
bonkers. Yeah, I don't even remember.
The 5 that were starting the last game of the season was the first time they ever played together.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it's.
And they lost 3. How do they lose 3 offensive linemen in the NFL? I'm always amazed when these offensive linemen are it's crazy. Just never could.
Right.
That's just
guys who seemed pretty bad in college.
Yeah.
So it's 4th round pick, and you're like, what do I not know here? Or how poorly were they coached? I guess. But
yeah.
Brody, outside of Clemson, is this the best defensive line, or at least the most talented defensive line in college football?
Yeah, I think it has a really good chance to be. Obviously Bama is really good too. Clemson, yeah, but I think there's a scenario where it is, because first you start with your known guys, right? Bijou Ojulari should be one of the 3 best edge rushers in the country, and I also think, and I know we're going to get to it, the kind of maybe being more of an outside linebacker this year. He's such a good athlete. I think that'll get more out of him personally. And then Ali Gay, obviously returner, really creates a lot of havoc. All these things, but the guy I'm most excited about, the guy I think come December might be considered the best interior D lineman in the country, is Mason Smith, former 5-star. And I mean, you look at those first, 5 or 6 games last year, he was a freak as a true freshman D lineman in the SEC. There was a point before, and then eventually he's so versatile, by the way, they eventually made him a D end because they were screwed at D end at some point. And he did pretty solid there. He was like an old school NFL 4-3 D end kind of thing. And he did solid. His numbers went down a little. But if you look at his pressure numbers when he was playing D tackle, I believe he was top 3 in the country in pressure rate and while playing D tackle. It was bonkers. So I think Mason Smith in year 2, he's clearly like that focal point of that 3-4. I think he's just the guy who might break out. And then we also have Jaquelin Roy, a guy who Dane Brugler of The Athletic put in his first round mock draft, and he's in a competition at nose tackle. And so I guess Jacobian Guillory is a guy they like. And also, I don't know if Roy's like your most natural nose. He's probably more of a 3 technique. So I don't know, maybe it's just not a natural thing. But point being, they're really deep there. I mean, they added Mekhi Wingo from Mizzou, who's going to be a rotation piece, and he was freshman all SEC last year. They really like what they got from him. They're just really, really deep and really top heavy. So if they don't, and they got Jamar Cain as a D-line coach, who I think really highly of. If you look at his pressure numbers, every Arizona State, Oklahoma, whenever he joins a place, they go up several percentage points. So I think this should be one of the best units in the SEC, if not number 1.
Yeah, and it could. Yeah, and look, if you have that dominant of a defensive line, it can mask any issues or some issues that you have on the back end.
True.
And that's a question that I have. With kind of a 2-part question. Are you expecting to see a lot of 3-4? Is it going to be more multiple? And then the secondary has a lot of talent, but it's all brand new. It is all transfers. They got a couple kids coming in from Collins' neck of the woods in Arkansas who have starting experience. So what are your thoughts on the secondary and how it's coming together? And then just from a scheme perspective, are you thinking of any one dominant base that we'll see, or is it going to be pretty multiple?
Yeah, like every coach ever, right? Matt House was saying he wanted to be multiple. And I believe that was the plan because he literally has plenty of history playing both. But and you know how it is, they only show X amount, but everything we have seen has been showing a 3-4. It just take that data point as you can. Everything they've shown so far, including scrimmages they've showed us, has been 3-4. So it does seem like that's going to be the base. Now, the secondary, it's almost like the opposite of what we said about the O-line, right? Where in theory, in a vacuum, if you are just thinking everybody's going to be perfectly healthy, yeah, it might be decent, right? If your outside corners are Jared Bernard Converse and Sevyn Banks, an all Big 12 guy on one of the best defense in the country last year in Bernard Converse, and Sevyn Banks, who's a preseason All-American before injuries, that's good outside corners right there, right? But one or two guys who both have injury history. And then if any of those guys get hurt, I mean, you're talking real problem mode. They have at the outside, they have no depth there. In the inside in the secondary, I would actually call it a strength, kind of a weird, quiet strength that doesn't get much attention, where they basically have 3 starters at safety between Jay Ward's a really good player at safety. Major Burns was solid last year as a co-starter safety. And then you add Joe Fuchsia from Arkansas, who obviously Colin knows, who, so that's 3, that's kind of a nice in the box presence. That's 3 starters there. Greg Brooks is really, and I'm curious to your Colin's thoughts on him, but Greg Brooks has looked like a clear starter in nickel, looks really good. Staff likes him. And then you have a former 5-star in Sage Ryan, who's his backup at nickel, essentially. And he's a really good sophomore. So that middle feels really, really sturdy. And I think if one of those outside corner goes down, I think Greg Brooks would just move outside, and Sage Ryan's a perfectly good option to move up. But still, I mean, I feel like corner is weirdly one of the more injured positions these days. You just have to assume one of those guys goes down, and you are screwed if that happens. So it's like top heavy. Yeah, those are 2 really good corners, but yeah, depth is a problem.
Any thoughts on any of your ex-Hogs?
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Brooks was great for us because we had so many injuries in the back. Well, I should say the back 8, because all we do is rush 3 and drop 8. Yeah. He was able to play so many different positions when Jalen Callawon was hurt. And he is kind of a glue guy that can do everything. And then Fuchsia is just, Barry Odom, we can never figure out if it's the players that are so good, or it's the Barry Odom scheme, or if it's just the quality of the offenses we're going against. But when we made that swap with LSU for secondary players, I thought LSU got the better end of the deal. If that was some sort of MLB deadline trade, LSU definitely fleeced us. So I think LSU is going to be fine on the back end, especially with a couple players that we've depended on for years. And, Arkansas has put up the numbers in the secondary to prove it. And, I think LSU is going to be fantastic. I think having a 2 deep, which is, you hear Brody keep talking about having a rotation of players at each position. and guys that are winning freshman of the year are like fighting for a job. That's actually some pretty good news. You just wish that you would hear that out of the offensive line, right? You just have no experience on the offensive line. And I think, Brody would agree with me that under the total in the first half of the game against Florida State in the opener is probably the play. I think there could be a 0-0 score there at half.
It's a good call. Actually, I really like that. Yeah.
I think and one of the other biggest questions is, look, you bring in Brian Kelly. He's always had always done really well as a favorite. His teams have always had a pretty high floor. But this is a big cultural change. And that's, if it works out, that's going to be a big benefit. If it doesn't, it could be a disaster. So my two questions for you, as if it wasn't hard enough to figure out this LSU team. I mean, I project 6.9 wins. Their win total is 6.5, over 6.5 minus 120. But they basically have 8 coin flips on the schedule if you go down and just model out. So it's like, all right, it's going to come down to a couple games here or there. Maybe it comes down to the team buying in. So for the third straight year, you're going to tell us about the LSU over.
Unfortunately, I am. Damn it.
And
this one's clear.
Do you think the team's buying in so far from what you've seen to what Kelly is preaching?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. I think the thing with Kelly that he is maybe second to Nick Saban in terms of, and I hate the term CEO. I think it's the worst term, but sometimes it's accurate. Just those guys who just know how to run an organization, know how to just a little detail stuff where they obsess over. That's what they're the best at. That's why he is such a good coach. And yeah, I have so many questions about the Brian Kelly era that are valid, and you should be asking. That one I have a lot of faith in. And I always go back to LSU just won a title with 3 straight coaches, and 2 of them weren't very good coaches. So I think there's this thing of, if you can get the guy who just, LSU's a sports car. We all know that. It's one of the more easy roadmap to success jobs. I think is a good way to put it. And if you get a guy who knows how to run the machine, and I think that part I've seen through 7 months or 8 months already, the accountability stuff that was lacking under both Miles and Ogeron. It's been a drastic change, and getting guys out of there, just a system of kind of like, if you don't do this, you do that, all that, like real point system and all that. So I do think that, I don't know if they're buying in as in like anything for coach, I don't know, but I do think there is very much a change in the culture at LSU, a change in just how things are operated and things like that, which kind of, again, I don't think I can quantify this right now, but could also change how things go in games, because I just think the bottom's going to be different, right? It's just Ogeron could mishandle a game with the best of them. Les Miles could mishandle a game with the best of them. I think Kelly's going to lead to a bit more of a better floor because he knows how to coach a football game. Now, again, I don't know what the team's ceiling is that makes it so hard, but to the actual question, 6.5, I'm willing to pay that juice anytime. Just because, and I'm stepping on your pod that I'm going to listen to the second we're done here, or the second it publishes, but the West is just in a weird place for, Bama, juggernaut, right? But an A&M should be good, but like Auburn's in the dumpster. Florida, just from what I talk to people around the program, I just don't think that's a roster set to really thrive this year. I do love Arkansas, but still, like, I don't think they're some world beater, and it's like, out of those non-top 2 games, how many are you sure they're losing? None, to your point, like 8 toss-ups. So I think I have to say over there, just because I think it's going to be a volatile year is the way I think it's going to be on the right night. Their top end talent's good enough to beat A&M, right? On the right night, and on the wrong night, they could easily lose to Ole Miss and Mississippi State, or Auburn. So I just think it's going to be, I think 8-4 is where I'm at. I think whenever I think that, I should subtract 1. So 7-5 is probably more accurate, but I just think it's hard to see them going 6-6 again, just in my personal opinion, but I've wrong 2 years in a row here.
I agree. I tend to agree with you. I think they're getting to 7. Now that it's come down, I would agree with you. I project them 6-9. I think with Kelly, you're always going to have, a high floor, and I think they do get at least a 7. So I agree with you this year. Have in the past, but we're on the same page.
Well, you guys were absolutely right last year, though. So
I am directly on 6.5. I think Brian Kelly gets them to a bowl. Whether they win that 7th game, I mean, it's probably going to come down to the Texas A&M game. Arkansas, to this point, I know we haven't done the Arkansas preview. It's going to be here on the pod. Arkansas, to this point, has not proved anything in camp or done anything through the portal to beef up a defensive line that can challenge the offensive line of LSU. So if they play today, I would immediately bet on LSU, because I think it comes down to the trench, and LSU is going to dominate people. And it really comes, you're going to have to handicap offensive lines. If a defensive line can challenge LSU's offensive line, it's going to give them problems, and then vice versa. And I think the trench is going to be paramount to Brian Kelly's first year. So my last question for Brody, we got to rack this. Will Brian Kelly win a national championship in the first 4 years?
Son of a bitch.
You have to, yes or no. There's no teeter-tottering here. 4 years.
Okay.
4 years.
Yeah, no. I will say he wins one national championship. I think so, because my theme here has really been, I just think he's going to build the infrastructure, the floor, all of that. Do I think LSU becomes a program that like lives in the playoff? No, I don't think that. But let's say hypothetically lives out his 10-year contract. I bet they make 2 or 3 playoffs. I could see them winning one. You know, I just think LSU is a program that's always going to have some of these bursts of years, whether it be 19 or 11 or all that. And yeah, I just think they're going to hang around that top 10 more. They're not going to go, seesaw as much. So if you put LSU in the mix enough, yeah, I think Brian Kelly's good enough to win one.
Heard it here first. National championship is headed your way, LSU fans. Just not this year, but thanks as always for joining us, Brody. And we'll talk to you again during the season at some point, but we always appreciate your insight. And make sure you follow along at Brody A. Miller. Follow all the stuff on The Athletic. We're still trying to figure out LSU, and it's going to be changing each and every day. Still don't know who the quarterback is, so make sure you follow all this stuff. No one's closer to the program. Thanks for joining us as always, brother.
Thanks, guys. Always a blast.
All right, great stuff on LSU, who's 40-1 to win the SEC West. The clear favorite is Alabama, minus 400 to win the SEC West, over 10.5 minus 280, or under 11.5 minus 160. There's not much you could say about Alabama. They're the best team in the country by my power ratings. I think by yours. Ohio State's not far behind. And then there's a big drop off. This is revenge tour season for Alabama. They're going to have revenge potentially against Calzada. Maybe he's starting for Auburn. We'll talk about that. They're going to have revenge against Texas A&M. Calzada's old team. Could have revenge against Georgia in the SEC championship. It's a very experienced team. They have coordinator continuity. Saban is angry and also sounding very confident. I mean, you can pretty much pencil this team into the college football playoff and probably the national title. I have them favored by at least 2 touchdowns in every single game. The lowest spread is at Arkansas, right around 2 touchdowns. From after the Arkansas game, they play Texas A&M at home, then they're at Tennessee, then they're home against Miss State, then they're at LSU, then they're at Ole Miss. I have them like right around 20 or 21 every game. So if you like one side, it might be around the key number as always. But there's some tricky spots on the schedule. Like at Arkansas is a tricky spot. Like how much are they looking ahead to Texas A&M in that revenge, that hyped up game with all the beef between Jimbo and Saban? Then they go to at Ole Miss, who's coming off of a bye. That's after the LSU game. So, maybe there's a clunker in here. But it's hard not to see Alabama winning the division. Bryce Young is back. Can he repeat the Heisman? I don't think so, but he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Might go number 1 overall. This team reloaded. There's not much more you can say. They also added Gibbs, one of the best running backs in the country from Georgia Tech. He'll help the backfield. They took one of Georgia's solid receivers in Burton. They added also Eli Ricks, the corner from LSU. They absolutely crushed the portal, which just doesn't even seem fair. If there's one question with this team, it's the offensive line. And, maybe it takes, and maybe receiver, but there's just 5 stars everywhere. Maybe it takes a little bit of time to gel, but this team is loaded. There's not much more I could say. It's revenge tour season. And I think they're running the table. Anything you want to really add? There's not much.
I mean, they ran the table during the pandemic. One of the greatest college football teams. But remember, that was a 10-game season. It was all conference. So, a little bit different circumstances. And you always pencil Alabama to not win a semifinal in the championship game because you just can't give Nick Saban 30 days to prepare and think that they're going to come out and blow it. I agree with everything you said. They're up there with Ohio State. They are ahead of everybody else, ahead of Georgia and ahead of Clemson. And when Nick Saban comes out and says, people don't understand, last year was a rebuilding season. It was. The offensive line was a huge issue. the secondary was a huge issue. There were reasons why this podcast was saying Alabama's not winning the national title game. There's holes in the trench. And, they got close. That's how good a rebuilding season was. They got close. So now if you look at it this year, obviously the offensive line, which returns 75% of their snaps, they have to improve in certain areas. If they don't, then there's going to be games like Arkansas. There's going to be games like Florida from last year's schedule. So when you look at this, who are the defensive lines on this current schedule that are going to give Alabama the biggest problems? It's not Arkansas. And, Texas A&M, say what you will, they're going through a little bit of change on the defensive front seven. LSU may have the best defensive line outside of Clemson. So that, I know they're both off of a bye, but I mean, that to me is the one game I would circle where LSU can match where Alabama will struggle the most, if they really kind of struggle at all in the offensive line, and another coach that can hang from a game execution and changing plans at halftime. That's Brian Kelly. So if they're going to lose a game, I think it's going to be LSU, but I don't think they are. Pencil them into the national championship game.
All right, moving on, because we'll talk about Bama, obviously, plenty during the season, and it'll mainly be like, all right, do we think this team can cover 21 or not against them? But we talked about LSU, talked about Alabama. The second favorite to win the West is Texas A&M. They're at plus 600, over 8.5 minus 165. I am not buying Texas A&M this year, and to win the division, I mean, and for any futures, they're going to have to beat Alabama at Alabama. That I do not see that happening this year. And look, I mean, if you look at their schedule, they should, they start with Sam Houston, App State, and then Miami. Not an easy game. Also, then they're against Arkansas and Arlington, and then at Miss State, at Bama. It's a brutal schedule. Then you're closing up with, Ole Miss, Florida, at Auburn, UMass, and LSU. A lot of home games to add, but that beginning stretch after Sam Houston State is absolutely vicious. There's quarterback questions here. Is it going to be Haynes King? Is it going to be Max Johnson? Is it going to be the true freshman? I'm not sold on either one of them. There's also, you lose Mike Elko, great defensive coordinator. DJ Durkin comes in. Now they have the number one recruiting class. They're loaded with talent, but they have to replace almost their entire defensive line. Can all the 5-stars step up? I'm not sure. They might be starting 4 underclassmen on that defensive line. So, I just basically think they're not going to win at Alabama. So I'm eliminating them for any futures or the division. As far as the win total, over 8.5 minus 165. I'm right around 8. I'm not. Now I'm a little higher on the market on Miami and Miss State. So maybe that's why, but I would lean under here with Texas A&M. I think the defense takes a step back with a lot of the pieces it's lost and Elko. I'm not sold on the quarterback situation. And it's just not it's just not a modern offense. Until I see it at Texas A&M, I'm not buying it. So I would lean under with A&M, and I'm not even considering them for any futures SEC or division conference or anything else. Thoughts?
Oh, I completely agree with you. I'm at 8.1 on this team. I would happily play an under on these guys, even though the projection's close to what the number is in the market. And, a 69% back on the offensive side, 52% back on the defensive side. But let's break that down a little bit. Are you running to the window to bet Haynes King? Are you running to the window to bet Max Johnson? I mean, Max Johnson was such an afterthought of an afterthought of an afterthought that, he had to have so many injuries to get the job at LSU. He was horrendous under pressure. And now the offensive line comes back. They return about 64% of snaps, but he loses Texas A&M loses a lot of skill position players. Now they still have Devin Achane in there who can absolutely burn, but they lose 58% of their receiving yards. They lose 40% of their rushing yards. So there's some work to be done here. You flip over to the defensive side. This is the biggest issue I have with this team. DJ Durkin has never coached a 4-2-5 in his life, but in the absence of Mike Elko, Jimbo said, we're going to run the 4-2-5 no matter what. Durkin's been calling dimes his entire life. So I think it's a little bit
Drop 8.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an adjustment for him to try and call this defense, because you have to disguise what you're going to do with your nickelback. You have to have 2 very strong linebackers. No one's questioning the talent that they're getting there, but you're right. This pro-style offense that Jimbo calls, it's not going to win a national championship, not anymore. And he just doesn't have any quarterback that can learn this within camp and then be able to run it in September. It just never happens. So interesting to see what happens there. I don't know. I just have a bad, like, get outside the spreadsheet. I get outside all the stats, and Jimbo's cutting jokes about giving DJ Durkin a conditioning test. Like, that was during practice 2 days ago from this recording. I'm out, man. I don't like the juju. I don't like a lot about this team, especially the fact that there's no quarterback. So yeah, under 8.5 for me.
Agreed. All right, moving on to Ole Miss, 16-1 to win the SEC West, over 7.5 minus 140. If you look at their schedule and you assume a loss to Bama, and they have 5, win games that they should win, puts them at 5-1. And then there's close to about 6 coin flips. So in order to get over, can they go 3-3 in those games? The good news is that the schedule starts off very easy. So you have Troy, then Central Arkansas, then at Georgia Tech, then home against Tulsa, home against Kentucky, then at Vandy, home against Auburn. Could they start 7-0? Potentially. But the problem is all the change. You have new coordinators, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and we also still don't know who the quarterback is between Altmaier and Dart. And this team is just basically going to be all transfers, new quarterback and all transfers. So projecting what they're going to look like, and they actually lost 4 defenders to the NFL. Defense was maybe a bit underrated last year. Will the transfers work out? I'm not sure. It's very hard to project. I project them at 7.47 wins, but I'm having trouble trying to gauge where their offense and defense is going to be at. Their over is 7.5 juice minus 140. So got them ahead. I'm playing the under, but not enough to play anything. Really hard team for me to gauge. Maybe they could figure some things out early in the year with a soft schedule, and that helps later. No play for me on Ole Miss, but definitely an intriguing team just because of all the moving pieces. Could argue that they won the transfer portal. I mean, bringing in like Zach Evans and Bentley in the backfield. You bring in just anywhere you look, they're going to be relying on transfers. So it should be an interesting experiment for Lane Kiffin. Throw in 2 coordinators, and we'll see. Can Ole Miss back up their season last year when they won 10 regular season games for the first time ever? What are your thoughts on the Rebs?
Yeah, well, hotty toddy. I'm glad you guys won that College World Series up in Omaha, because it might be a while before there's any other kind of celebration. I've got them projected at 7.2. I have some issues with this team. I don't think it fits the mold of what Lane Kiffin wants. He needs a quarterback that can run the RPO, read the man that's in space, and then make a decision whether we're going to go deep. And Luke Altmaier proved last year he's not the quarterback to do that. Matt Corral was hurt a lot, and there's a reason why Luke Altmaier just didn't get a lot of playing time, and especially in critical situations. So then you turn to Jackson Dart, the spring game and the practices there, the reports coming out of there are horrendous. He can't learn how to run this offense whatsoever. He comes from the Graham Harrell air raid. So it is quite the change to actually, put the ball in the breadbasket in the stomach of the running back and then try to make a read on a guy and then make a decision whether you're going to hand off, run, or throw. Just seems to be something that Jackson Dart's going to take some time for him to get that. He does bring in one of the transfers you didn't mention was Michael Trigg, a tight end that comes in from USC. Yeah. So there's pieces here, but this is not the Snoop Connor. This is not the DK Metcalf. This is not the level of athlete they've had outside the tackle box that, there was in the past. So I expect Ole Miss to run the ball a lot, especially with the Zach Evans and Ulysses Bennett from SMU. Like, they're going to run the ball, and they have an offensive line that, isn't too bad at pushing the pile. The defense is going to continue to be horrendous. They did have some improvement, not from a success rate, but they were kind of locking down when it got towards a red zone, top 50 and finishing drives, which is a big deal for Ole Miss, but they're not forcing any fumbles. They're not getting behind the line of scrimmage. So I believe this season is going to be a downgrade from what Lane's had the past couple of years. And I think he knows it in his quarterback room, and he knows it with the offense that he has. So under for me, I'm going to guess that Lane Kiffin's 4th down attempts, which I actually talked to him about at SEC Media Days, I bet that gets cut down if he doesn't have the belief that his quarterbacks can run the offense.
Kicker also, I believe, got suspended. I'm not sure on his status. I'll have to look that up. Their punter's gone. I had some questions about their special teams. All right, it's time. moving on to Arkansas football, 16-1, just like Ole Miss to win the SEC West. Win total over 7 minus 115. I could tell you right off the bat, Colin, because I don't really go into too much Arkansas. I let you handle that. I have them projected 7.58. So if I was going to play it, I would play the over. By the way, they won all 3 trophy games last year. LSU, Texas A&M, and Missouri.
They won 5 trophies. Get the intro right.
The 3 important ones after you lost 15 straight. Pretty wild. And, it is a brutal schedule. You could argue it's one of the 5 hardest schedules in the country. This 5-game stretch, Texas A&M and Arlington, or should we throw in Petrino, playing your boy Petrino in Missouri State?
What a game that's going to be.
Arkansas has some of I was going back and looking at those instances where teams play their first game against a team that's already played. And no one has more embarrassing losses in that scenario than Arkansas. They lost to Toledo at home. They lost to who else? San Jose State.
I mean, to name them all. We've lost to the Citadel in 1992. You got any others for me? Because you can't beat them.
UL Monroe in 2012. They were 30-point underdogs, and
that was in War Memorial. That was in Little Rock. It doesn't count.
It still counts. But yeah, Arkansas does start off with Cincinnati. They're touchdown favorites. But this stretch, this 5-game stretch between September 24th and October 29th, it only has 1 home game. Texas A&M and Arlington, home against Alabama, at Mississippi State, at BYU. At least you get a bye, and then you're at Auburn. That is vicious 5-game stretch. So if you're Arkansas, you got to start out 3-0 against Cincy, South Carolina, Missouri State. Luckily, they're all at home. And then you probably want to finish. You could easily finish 4-0 too. You have Liberty at home, then LSU at home, then Ole Miss at home, and then you're at Missouri. So that could be 7 wins right there. And then you have that tough 5-game stretch, just a brutal 5-game stretch. I mean, I'd show them, there's 6 coin flips based on my projected spreads. I would lean over. My biggest question for them, and then I'll let you wax poetic about them and tell us where you're concerned. Like, there is coordinator continuity. You got KJ Jefferson back. The question just is, how important was Treylon Burks? I talked about Wan'Dale Robinson leaving for Kentucky. He was number 1 in college football with percentage of explosive plays as from a receiver. I guess Treylon Burks was number 2. Just an invaluable weapon that Arkansas had. Can Jefferson throw accurate enough to balance the Briles RPO attack is the question, because they lost 3 of their top 4 receivers. They are transfer reliant. And can the run game also be as effective without the concern? So if this is kind of the domino effect. If Jefferson can't be accurate enough and the passing game really suffers without Burks, then teams aren't respecting the passing game even more. And then does the running game suffer as a result? The offensive line does return 4 starters, yada, yada, yada. I'll let you get into it. What do you see about your Hogs, and where's the bet?
The bet is going to be on over 7. This opened 6.5, took a lot of steam. It got up to 7. I saw some 7.5s out there. And interestingly enough, the under got pinged on that. And then a lot of shops a couple of shops I know came back down to 7. So this is a number that I make at 7.9. And you don't have to worry about, hey, Arkansas gets to 6 wins or bowl eligible. They will be fired up to go up to Missouri to play for another trophy, because trophy games is what Sam Pittman does. You got to bet him posing with 5 trophies at the end of last season after winning the Outback Bowl is going to be the highlight of his career until he's, I don't know, the Alabama head coach someday. There are problems. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up everybody's ass, because everybody inside the state of Arkansas knows there's major issues with this team, and we haven't even hit the field yet. So issue number 1, Stuckey mentioned it, Treylon Burks is gone. We're getting in Jadon Hazelwood from Oklahoma. The problem is he is not Treylon Burks. He doesn't run the same routes. He's not as physical, and we're not really sure he's going to be doing small crossing routes for KJ Jefferson. And the issue with KJ Jefferson is, as much as we want to compare him to Cam Newton, and as great as it is that he can just run people over, he does not check down. Treylon Burks had twice as many targets as anybody on the team, 3 times as many 3rd down targets as anybody on the team. He has no chemistry whatsoever with anybody else. The good news is Kendall Browse is going to run the ball and try to stay in standard downs as long as possible. We have a rotation of 4 running backs, Raheem Sanders, Dominic Johnson return here. We are going to run heavy RPO, heavy zone runs. And if we can stay on schedule, we will run the ball down your throat. You get us into 3rd and long, get us off schedule, Arkansas is going to struggle. And that hasn't changed through camp here. We do have one of the best offensive lines in the SEC, led by center Ricky Stromberg. Keep an eye on the health of them. I'm sure Sam Pittman won't, let the offensive line get too banged up before we go into the season here. Schedule is super tough, right? I mean, at BYU, who wants to go to at BYU in the middle of your SEC schedule? So I'll have to have a talk with Mr. Hunter Yurachek about that. As far as other holes on this, you cannot drop 8 on a defense unless you have pressure. Trey Williams is gone from the edge. John Ridgeway, amazing nose tackle that we got from a FCS school, gone. We have guys right now at the nose tackle. Isaiah Nichols is making a lot of rumblings right now. We're not sure if he's going to pan out like John Ridgeway did, but Stuck, I attest to this. Barry Odom's defenses, I'm dropping 8. I'll give you the entire field, but you can only do that if you could apply pressure. Arkansas can't do that with this current set of defensive linemen that they have. That KJ Jefferson issue with not being able to check down, not being able to get off your hot read, the play action passing is not going to work. So I'm nervous about this team. I'm nervous about this schedule. I have no issues with the run game. So when you look at the schedule Stuck, there are 8 teams on this schedule that cannot defend the run. They can stuff 8 in the box. They won't be able to stop what Arkansas pulls in between the tackles. Now, those other teams, they can dominate Arkansas and get them behind schedule. So we're going over the win total. There's a bunch of teams on here that can't defend the run. I'm not saying it's going to be pretty, and I'm not going to say we're going to cover a bunch of spreads, but this team can get to 7 wins and 8 to cash our tickets.
Love it. All right, I'm going to keep that trend going. I'm going to go with another over. Let's move on to Mississippi State. 60-1 to win the SEC West, over 6.5 minus 135. I project Mississippi State 7.7 wins.
I'm with you.
I am super high on this team. I love this over. I love it more over 6.5 minus 120, but I would still play it here. This is Will Rogers, who was excellent last year. He is a 3rd-year starting quarterback in Mike Leach's air raid system. He will be the 4th 3rd-year starting quarterback that Mike Leach has ever had in all of his previous stops as a head coach. In all 3 prior instances, his team won at least 9 games, improving their win total by at least 2 from the previous year. And, this Mississippi State team went 7-6 last year, despite some bad luck in 1-possession games. Just refs cost them a game against Memphis. Their special teams were horrid. They went out and addressed that by getting kickers in the transfer portal. I think their special team should be better. Even the drops against that Ole Miss, they outplayed Ole Miss statistically in the Egg Bowl and lost that game. So they were a bit unlucky. The defense is rock solid. I think it'll be rock solid once again. And I just the timing of a Mike Leach offense. And look, they lost their tackles, but I don't think it's as important in an air raid offense where you're getting rid of the ball so quickly. And just this, Mike Leach's offenses are all about timing. They are all about repetition, and Rodgers now has it down pat. I love what I saw from him last year. I love the defense, and I think there is at least 7 wins on this schedule. I wouldn't be shocked if they gave Georgia a run as well. Give me the Bulldogs and the Fighting Leeches over 6.5. That's my favorite win total in the SEC West. You're on the same page?
I'm 100% with you. My win total is at 7.5. And if you want Will Rogers to do what he's got to do, then you have to give him an offensive line. And that's what they have. They were 5th in the nation last year in pressure rate allowed. You can point to their center, who might be the best in the country. At least he was graded by PFF last year as the best pass protecting center in the country, like Kingston Sharp. That the defense is what everybody I think should be excited about. You get 100% of your, passes defense back. They get 85% of their tackles back. They get all of their PBUs back. They get 87% of their pressure back. This defense is legit. They can hang in the SEC. Their corners can go one-on-one. They don't need to have any double teams. This is going to be what Mike Leach had intended to have from day one, which is a solid offensive line, a quarterback that can run the air raid. It's not going to be like one of those deep routes. They might throw one every once in a while, but they're going to dink and dunk you. And this team was one of the best in finishing drives last year. So I expect more of the same. Schedule lightens up from what they've had. Mike Leach walked into a killer schedule to start off his career there. So, I like this team a lot. I agree with you. I'm going over the 6.5.
Yep. Yeah. Getting Jordan Davis on that defense really helps. I like some of the additions they had in the transfer portal. And remember, Leach, when he got here, he also had to deal with a COVID year.
Yep.
Trying to install this new offense completely different than what Mississippi State was running. Will Rogers now has all the experience, all the timing, even after losing Polk, still a really experienced running back and wide receiver room. And last year, and this is one of the most experienced teams in the country. I think top 10 in returning production. And last year they were extremely unlucky on things like fumble luck. They only recovered like 30% of their fumbles. They were the only team in the SEC to make less than 70% of their field goals. They didn't have a kicker. It was a horrendous problem. And they brought in two potential. I don't know who's going to win it. They could go with two kickers, but I love this kid Biscardi. I think their special teams, which were finished, I think 120th in the country, will be much better. That should translate to more closer. For some of the close losses they took into close wins, I love it, over 6.5. All right, let's close out the SEC West with the Auburn Tigers, War Eagle, 100-1 to win the SEC West. The team that won a national title not too long ago. 100-1 would have been crazy to win the national title if you told me that 10 years. Now, 100-1 to win the division. What is going on with Brian Harsin in year 2? He lost 5 straight to end the year last year. They did have that game where they could have easily beat Alabama, but didn't. He brought in the new offensive coordinator, the 4th offensive coordinator in the last 4 years, a new defensive coordinator who's apparently going to keep the same scheme. And by the way, this is the 3rd offensive coordinator in the last 14 months. And there is a quarterback battle. So lots of change with Auburn. They were 1-4 in one possession games last year and finished 6-7. Bo Nick's season is obviously gone. They're probably going to focus on their rushing attack with Bigsby and Hunter. It remains to be seen who's going to win the quarterback position. Like Robbie Ashford's getting a lot of love now, the Oregon transfer. Finley, is he in jail still? I don't know. Zach Calzada, the transfer from Texas A&M, and then you have another freshman in the mix. So I don't know. There's 4 or 5 guys that could win it. Strength is at running back and tight end. It is an experienced offensive line with 120 career starts. It's Hudson left for UCF. The wide receiver room leaves a lot to be desired. And the pass D wasn't that great last year. And they lose their top 2 players in McCreary and Smoke Monday. Front should be pretty good against the run and off the edge again, but there's some concerns on the back end. So it's all about the quarterback. And to me, the secondary is the biggest question on the defense. And it's all about the first 5 games. They have to start 5-0 if you're going to go over here. And otherwise, if they drop a couple games, it could get ugly with Harsin. I'm not sure where he stands. And I have this as the number 1 hardest schedule in the country. So they start with Mercer and San Jose State. Hopefully they don't pull in Arkansas and lose to San Jose State at home. But then they have Penn State at home, and then Missouri at home and LSU at home. So you could see 5-0 there. Those are 5, and that's before you go to Georgia, then before you go to Ole Miss, and then Arkansas, then at Miss State, then Texas A&M, then Western Kentucky, then at Bama. So it doesn't get any easier. You got to beat Penn State. You got to beat LSU at home. You can't drop any to Missouri, San Jose State, or Mercer. So those are the 3. That's your floor, the 3 wins. If you win those, you technically could start out 5-0, and then I don't know how many more wins you're going to get, but that's the only shot you have of going over 6 minus 105 is a fast start. Is Auburn set up for a fast start here? I'd project them at 5.85. So I would lean under, but not enough to play it. I'm having a lot of trouble figuring out what this team is going to look like. I would think that there's a much better chance that things go completely wrong than they go completely right, especially with this schedule and all the change. What are your thoughts on War Eagle?
Well, first off, thanks to Brian Harsin for getting me in trouble with my wife as I was creeping on Instagram on the alleged allegations of inappropriate conduct and see who all was involved with that. And him coming out at SEC Media Days and saying, guys didn't expect me to be here. It's just like a level of immaturity. Like, does that trickle down to your team? And it takes me back to the fact that they fired their wide receiver coach, I think, third game in last year. Derek Mason, like you don't hear about anything. Just in the middle of the night, he pulls a Dan Enos and exits the state of Alabama and goes to Oklahoma State. I mean, there are things that are happening in this program on the outside, off the field, that make me think that not everything is bundled up and being run like, we talk about Brian Kelly running LSU like a corporation, Alabama running Alabama like a corporation. That's not what's happening here, or else TJ Finley is not on a damn motorcycle with his helmet off, evading police, right? I mean, it's August in the SEC, so somebody had to have it. But I just don't think Brian Harsin has his team buttoned up whatsoever. The good news is they have one of the best defensive lines in all of the SEC. And they have two of the best running back combinations in the league with Jarquez Hunter and with Tank Bigsby. Now, I'm very interested in Tank Bigsby having to be begged not to get in the portal and leave. That's another story that leaks out there. So there's a lot of issues here. My projection is right on the dot, but there's really, I don't want any piece of the way that Brian Harsin is taking this program. And if he was in any kind of jeopardy of getting fired last year, if he comes off that bye week and loses to Arkansas, they might fire him. He might get close to 6 wins and they might fire him anyways. I mean, there's just a clash here. A guy that never had a footprint in the SEC whatsoever is in, working for Chris Peterson for a decade. I just think he's out of his element. And we're going to, it's starting to show with what kind of activities are happening off the field and being reported.
Yeah. The hope is that you figure out the quarterback situation and start out 5-0. So if that's what you're looking for, if you're an Auburn fan, with those 5 home games to start that are certainly all winnable. All right, before we get out of here, I do want to once again thank Brody Miller for joining us, giving us great insight on LSU. And but let's recap our favorite win total and our future from the SEC West. I'll start. I don't have a future here. I haven't played this yet, but I would lean under in Texas A&M, lean under in Ole Miss, lean over in Arkansas, lean over in LSU. Not sure which ones I'll add, but my favorite and the one that I have a decent chunk on is Mississippi State over 6.5 wins. Look, you look back historically when Mike Leach has had a third-year starting quarterback. It's happened 3 previous times. He's won 9 games each of those 3 seasons. Will Rogers is back for his 3rd year. He showed me a lot last year. The timing, this offense is all about the timing, repetition. They have that now. Even after losing Polk, experienced receivers, experienced backfield, I think this offense will continue to evolve. The defense was great last year, should continue to be great. Love a lot of the pieces they added in the transfer portal. And last year, their special teams were horrendous. They couldn't make a kick. They went out and addressed that in the transfer portal. So I really like what Miss State is doing. Yes, it is a tough schedule, but this is one of the 10 most experienced teams in the country. I think they at least get to 7 wins. Shake those cowbells. Mississippi State over 6.5. How about you, Colin? Where are you going?
I like that. I'm going to join you on that. I'm going to put the money in and put it on the Action app right after this podcast. And then I'm going to also put in Texas A&M under 8.5. It's a number I projected 8.1. They lose a ton of skill position from a rushing perspective, from a pass receiving perspective. And on the defensive side of the ball, we're not going through a scheme change. We're going through a coordinator change with DJ Durkin, who has not coached a nickel before in his life. He usually has been coaching dime, having rushing 3, dropping 8. And that's just not the way Texas A&M does any business. Switching over to the offensive side of the ball, the quarterback situation is a bit questionable between Haynes King, some highly touted freshmen that are in there, which was the same thing that we heard last year about Zach Calzada and Haynes King. So with Max Johnson, we've already seen that on the field play out about how ineffective he is with pressure when he was behind LSU's horrendous offensive line last year. And neither of these things are working out. Plus the style of a pro style formation that Jimbo likes to run is just not up with the times. This team is going to fall out of being number 5 in the college football playoff rankings. I expect them to come to the mid-pack of the SEC West, and I'm going to take an under 8.5 on your Texas A&M Aggies this year.
And I'm surprised Colin didn't mention it, but I will again. He likes Arkansas over, and I tend to agree with him. We had Brody like the LSU over, Colin like the Arkansas over, and from my numbers, I would agree.